Pilihan kami ialah merdeka atau mati.
Nikmati keseruan masa lalu dengan subscribe channel YouTube Majalah Historia, serta aktifkan notifikasinya. Channel Majalah Historia adalah salah satu produk dari historia.id, berupa video ilustrasi sejarah berbasis artikel yang pernah tayang di laman historia.id. Channel ini tidak hanya berisi tema sejarah yang bikin kening berkerut, macam politik dan militer, namun juga tema ringan seperti kuliner, gaya hidup, hingga hiburan. Pantengin masa lalu dengan share, like, komen channel YouTube Majalah Historia.
Untuk mempertajam sebuah pemikiran, meluruskan yang bengkok, menyindir yang jumawa, mempertanyakan sebuah pernyataan, membuka yang tabu, membentuk yang tak terarah, mengangkat yang direndahkan, dan memanusiakan yang ditinggikan. Itu kenapa opini ada.
Mengawali hari dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat disajikan cepat, akurat, dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Maidcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Maidcom.id, digitally inspire people.
Stop sebar berita hoax. Dapatkan kabar terpercaya dan benar melalui e-paper Media Indonesia dengan berlangganan senilai. Unduh aplikasi Media Indonesia di Android, registrasi dan pilih paket berlangganan. Lakukan pembayaran dan nikmati layanan e-paper Anda. Informasi lebih lanjut. Unduh aplikasi Media Indonesia sekarang juga.
Welcome to Road to Jakarta International Literary Festival 2021. Heroes Remaking History. Please notice our guidelines for Jakarta International Literary Festival YouTube channel viewers. Viewers are welcome to subscribe to the Jakarta International Literary Festival YouTube channel to get notifications about the panel discussion schedule. Panel discussions will be held at Zoom meeting and linked live to the Jakarta International Literary Festival YouTube channel. Discussions will be held in English. Indonesian translation will be available on Jakarta International Literary Festival YouTube live screen. Questions and comments can be submitted via the live comment column or live chat on the Jakarta International Literary Festival YouTube channel while the discussion is in progress. Questions will be forwarded to the moderator to be mentioned to the speakers. Discussions will also be translated by a sign language translator. Thank you and enjoy the festival. Selamat datang di Road to Jakarta International Literary Festival 2021 Heroes Remaking History. Berikut adalah panduan untuk mengikuti panel diskusi melalui kanal YouTube Jakarta International Literary Festival. Pemirsa dipersilakan untuk subscribe kanal YouTube Jakarta International Literary Festival untuk mendapatkan pemberitahuan mengenai jadwal panel diskusi. Panel diskusi dilaksanakan di Zoom meeting dan ditautkan live ke kanal YouTube Jakarta International Literary Festival. Panel diskusi akan disajikan dalam bahasa Inggris. Terjemahan bahasa Indonesia tersedia langsung di layar YouTube Jakarta International Literary Festival. Pertanyaan dan komentar dapat Anda sampaikan melalui kolom live comment atau live chat di YouTube Jakarta International Literary Festival saat panel sedang berlangsung. Tim kami akan meneruskan daftar pertanyaan Anda kepada moderator untuk disampaikan kepada pembicara. Penerjemah bahasa isyarat juga akan ditampilkan dalam panel diskusi ini. Terima kasih dan selamat menikmati festival ini.
Hello, everyone. Good evening here in Indonesia, in Jakarta. This is the Jakarta International Literary Festival. My name is Evi Mariani. I will be the moderator for the fourth panel of the Jakarta International Literary Festival. Before we start, I would like to remind you to follow Jakarta International Literary Festival social media, which is in Instagram and Twitter, which is at JILF Indo. And also, I would like to thank the curators for the festival, which is Isyana Artarini and Roni Agustinus. And this is once again panel 4, and the title of this panel 4 is Kisah-Kisah Masa Depan or Future Stories. Let me tell you the summary of what we'll talk about tonight. Yeah. So if realities help shape our stories, what would our literature look like when we are not experiencing the same things? Algorithms increasingly play a part in the way we perceive and experience the world around us. But the screens that we use to access information does not necessarily provide us with the same set of data and reality for everyone. What we watch and read through the screens are often amplifying what we already believe instead of providing us with a new set of information. These different sets of realities affect the way we process what goes on in our society. How would these parallel realities influence the way we navigate our current moment and the way we explore identities and existence? And how would this affect the way we write our stories in the future? Tonight, we have three speakers, distinguished speakers tonight with us, Mr. Mulya Amri, and then Mr. Brilliant Yotenega, and Miss Richa Kaupate. So, for the first presentation, I would like to read the bio of our first speaker, Mr. Mulya Amri. Mulya Amri is the research director at Kata Data Insight Center, based in Jakarta. Mulya has co-written 20 books and book chapters. He has 20 years of experience working with government officials, businesses, and civil society groups in Indonesia, Singapore, Brunei, the Philippines, China, and the US. Mulya has a PhD in public policy from the National University of Singapore, a master's in urban planning from the University of California, Los Angeles, and a bachelor's degree from Institut Teknologi Bandung, Indonesia. I would like to give the floor to Mulya. Hello, Mulya. How are
Hello,
you?
Baifi. I'm well, thanks. Hope you are as well. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the committee to invite us, me representing Katadata, to share in this great occasion. It's a very wonderful topic that we are engaged in at the moment, and something that's very important, very close to our lives, and very close to the transformations that are happening around the world. So I would like to share my thoughts about social media algorithms and our love and hate relationship with them, right? So we love them, but we also, in a way, we also hate them. So let me try to get a little bit into what is the main issue with these algorithms. And I'd like to bring it back to the presence of information, right? In the past, like creating and sharing information is a major task. Yeah, I feel like in the Stone Age, literally to write a sentence, you actually have to carve stones, right? Imagine how long that would take. And then we found the printing press. Then we had newspapers and the print media, and that also enabled this huge and fast spread of information. But it's nothing compared to what we have now. Constant internet of things everywhere, everything emitting data. Like at the moment, I don't know how many devices I have around me, my laptop, my computer, and it's all sending all these kinds of information about me, about my home, every second or even every microsecond, right? So when too much information was a problem, then curators and filters, become saviors. I see these social media algorithms as basically filters, right? Curators. They curate what we see, but then at some point, then we start to see could the saviors be the problem? They harvest our data for obscure purposes that we're not very 100% sure what they're used for. Some people claim they polarize us into extreme opposition, social oppositions. So how do we make sense of it? And can we even take back our free will from the hands of these algorithms, right? And I'd like to start by saying that these algorithms, well, I mentioned a little bit, we need these algorithms anyway, in any form, especially now with too much information, because data overload drives us crazy. Information is endless, but our attention span, our brain's capacity to process data information is limited. So we need to focus. And in a time when there's too much information everywhere. Attention is very valuable. Can we get someone to pay attention for just 1 minute? Sometimes it's even hard uh, to get someone's attention for 1 minute. That's why these filters, they work. They curate information for us. They work into our brain, saying, and we think this is the information that I want. This is the information that we need, or so we think that is so, right? And in the past, that like the print media, magazines, they kind of like match our cognitive ability because they're limited by the number of pages. Even electronic media, right, like TV shows and radio shows, they're limited by airtime. You have breaks in between for commercials and such. But now, so we do that. I mean, like, we understand that, and we actually choose to read the papers. We choose to watch the stations that we feel do a better curation for us. So these algorithms have been there uh, for a long time, but it's not really algorithm. It's done by people, right? So I trust by his judgment in running the media, and I trust you. I buy the newspaper. I trust what you write and what you. So that's kind of like your curation. That's kind of like you have your own algorithm in your brain, and I think I match that. I like what that is, right? So it's been there, but now the difference is that it's now done automatically by what is called algorithms, right? By computers and such. And for the most part, when we're still talking about print media, radio and TV, they're still very much part of journalism. They are governed by journalism standards and ethics, distinguishing facts from fiction, covering both sides, check and recheck. But now with the internet and social media, with this avalanche of information, how do we ensure that whatever information either is from print media, online media, or even just people posting their status and opinions in social media, how can that be verified, right? So social media knows us very, very well. I think if you're into social media, I would argue they know us even better than our spouse, family, and friends. I mean, how many times per day do we like something or dislike something or block something? And do you get a chance to tell every single action of you in social media to your spouse? Maybe not even, right? Maybe like a few you told your spouse, hey, I like this, but I think for the most part we didn't even have a chance to share that. And actually, if the committee can help to show the slides that I had prepared, it's not going to be like a lecture slide. I'm just going to show some data, but basically, Kata Data, where I work, we did a national survey in August, and we just launched it a couple of weeks back. It's a joint work with the Ministry of Communication and Informatics, and also Cyberkreasi, which is working to build digital literacy in Indonesia. And we find out that so if anyone is interested to download that or access that report, including the data, it's a survey-based data. You can go to katadata.co.id/status literasi digital. I'm sorry, it's in Indonesian, but you can just look for status literasi digital Indonesia, and you're sure to find it. And we find that based on the survey, social media is the main channel of information for the people. So we ask all respondents who have access to the internet, and they can answer multiple answers. And 76% of them said that social media is their main source of information. And second to that is television, which is 59%. And then 25.2% is online news, and so on, right? So social media is at the top. It's our go-to place to look for information, even more than television, even more than online news, even more than government website and others. And print media and radio are below that. And we also ask them, who sends you information most intensively, and who do you share them to most intensively? So again, each one can answer multiple answers, but it's the most often people, the group of people that people communicate most often with in social media are families and relatives, and they do that mostly by WhatsApp and then by Facebook. So like, who sends you information the most? 75% answered family and relatives, 58% answered neighbors. And then who do you share information to most intensively? 81% said it's family and relatives, followed by close friends at 66%. So we are very much a familial community. We have WhatsApp group for families and relatives, and we listen to them. Although, of course, when we ask who is it that you trust the most, which information source do you trust the most, they say it's actually from religious leaders, right? So if it's coming from religious leaders and then forwarded by your family member, it's gonna be, the likelihood is gonna be very high that you're gonna buy into that, right? So communication among family members and relatives is strong through social media, and the most trusted is religious leaders. But then, what does it have to do now with with this topic, with these algorithms, right? Um, then a docudrama. I think many people have watched it, The Social Dilemma. It was released this year. If you haven't watched it, then please watch it. It's a bit extreme, and I think there's sometimes we may need some extreme position, a situation to open our eyes about something, but it shows that the information in the social media and the algorithms do a lot of things for us. They collectively reveal many things about ourselves, including our political leanings. And there have been some real examples where these data and information are harvested for political purposes, right? And that's the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And in Indonesia, there was a survey done by Carta Politika and asked uh, whether respondents think that the social media influences the way that they voted in the 2019 general election, the presidential election that took place last year. 62% said that yes, social media did influence how they voted. So it's quite telling. It's quite it's strong condition to kind of like process that. And the movie, the docudrama that I mentioned about the social dilemma, it mentioned a whole lot of things about the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal. But uh, interestingly, the New York Times reported that amid the crisis, one set of voices remained notably silent, and they are Facebook users whose data was harvested. So this is quite interesting, right? So there was a hashtag, uh, delete Facebook, and it was trending on Twitter for a while, but only temporarily. And so ultimately, I think many people were not ready to ditch social media altogether. But the more concerning thing of the issues that was raised by the social dilemma is how these algorithms play with our capability of managing information. So the filters, the social media algorithms that was supposed to help us focus on the information that we think matters ended up filtering out the information that could keep us together as a society. That was their argument, right? So we wanted these filters. We wanted them to help us focus on the information that we like and what we think matters. But as a side effect, it filters out. You can't have a filter that just goes one way, right? When you filter something in, you also filter something out. It's a filter. And so a status update that one sees on social media might be different from what another person sees on theirs. search engine's result might be different according to each user profile, and we become trapped in our own filter bubbles. This is a filter bubble is a term that Eli Pariser coined actually way back in 2010. He already saw that when we speak in social media, we speak in echo chambers. Echo chambers meaning like we speak something and then we hear our own echo, and that's what's happening in the U.S. This graph is a brilliant graph based on research by Pew Research Center in the U.S. And you can see that it's that uh, back in before the mid 2000s, Democrats and Republicans aren't that much different in terms of their political leaning, right? Okay, so Democrats tend to be more liberal, Republicans tend to be more conservative. But if you take a look at the median point, it's not that far off. It's like sometimes it tilts a little bit to the left, sometimes it tilts a little bit to the right. Always consistently, Democrat more liberal, Republicans more conservative, but it's not far off. Then something happens in mid 2000, actually there starting 2007, 2008, 2009, then 2012. Look, it becomes even farther apart. And actually there's a updated data up until 2017, but I couldn't find one that is animated such as this. So I keep the animated one. But basically the story is kept consistent until 2017. And the docudrama Social Dilemma mentioned that this could social media played a part in this. And we've also seen in Jakarta, for example, right, the governor election of 2017, it caused a huge social rift. And whereas in the US it might be about race and politics, in Indonesia it was religion played a big part of that, and religion still played a big part of the 2019 um, uh, presidential election. Um, and so in the next slide, we see that uh, does how does social media work? Does it polarize us? So if you, the next slide will show that basically in Indonesia, for example, there was a survey done by Sigi and Ipsos, global survey on internet security and trust. It shows that in countries such as, for example, as Kenya, like 77% of our survey respondents said that social media is actually increasing political polarization. Of course, it's in Indonesia, it's 58%. That's actually more than those that say that social media has no impact or is lessening political polarization. Of course, that's not it doesn't happen all over the world, right? We see this places like Japan, for example. What a peaceful society. Actually, if you take a look at social media, only 7% of the people say that social media is increasing polarization. And actually, there's more people who say, see the green bar on the upper right, there's more people who says that social media is lessening political polarization. Now, wouldn't that be nice, right? Why can't we have that social media? Why have social media contributed to an increasing social polarization? And why can't we have that other social media? Like, I don't know what they did in Japan. Like I think this is something that studies are being done about that. But there was an interesting discussion at the beginning of this year. Basically, Katadata invited Carol Cadwallader. Carol is the Guardian investigative journalist who's reporting on the Cambridge Analytica scandal, gained her a nomination for the 2019 Pulitzer Prize. So we put her on the stage with Bambang Harimurti, a senior Indonesian journalist, and they had like a great discussion on how we can take back social media. Can we make social media work to our benefit instead of creating rifts? Right? So Bambang Harimurti, Pak Bambang, he drew some analogies, brilliant analogies, and that saw that how the relationship between social media and digital companies, it could be likened to the relationship between factory workers and industrial capitalists in that era, or even between landless peasants and landlords. So he's hinting that maybe some form of organizing or forming a union of social media users might be an option. So, and Carol, say there is already a union of YouTube creators that started in Germany to demand for fairer rights. And we also saw that, Taylor Swift had a you know, struggle to have fairer compensation on Spotify as well. So just to finish this off, this is my final point. Basically, Carol then mentioned that the growth of the internet has occurred so fast that this game of social media, all these algorithms, right? It has started to play before we had time to prepare the rules of the game. How do we ensure that people have our government, we have worked to ensure that more people now have access to internet, faster internet, more affordable internet. But how can we ensure that people can use it to their benefit and not be utilized for things that they don't want, right? So in Europe, there's already a general data protection regulation. Indonesia has drafted this law also on personal data. It's being considered by the parliament now, and we hope that it will be established. It will be issued soon in the form that is in line with the protection of personal data. And I think that's what we think can help make us have better internet and better social media in the future. I'll stop at that. Thanks, Maifi.
Thank you so much. That's very interesting. So, what are realities? Is my reality the same with yours? That's the big question we want to talk about. So now we will segue into literary world by giving the floor to Mas Brilian Yotenega. Allow me to read his short bio. So Brilian Yotenega is the founder of nulisbuku.com, which is literally writingbooks.com. The pioneer of online self-publishing platform in Indonesia. He created nulisbuku.com in 2010 and then storyal.co in 2015. He strives to learn and further distribute varying studies, especially on arts and leadership. His Twitter handle is @byotenega. Please, Mas Ega.
Terima kasih, Mbak Evi. Saya akan membacakan esai yang saya tulis tentang topik pada malam hari ini dalam bahasa Indonesia. Algoritma, benarkah adalah ancaman untuk dunia kepenulisan masa depan? Dalam perkembangan dunia saat ini, masa ketika arus informasi menyebar begitu cepat melalui media sosial, aplikasi, dan mesin pencari. Manusia seperti terpolarisasi pada dua kutub utama. Kutub pertama adalah orang-orang yang tunduk penuh pada kuasa algoritma untuk menentukan informasi apa yang mereka konsumsi. Orang-orang ini memandang kenyataan sebagaimana terpaan informasi yang mereka terima melalui trending media sosial atau apa yang ditawarkan oleh mesin pencari. Mereka mengkonsumsi informasi yang itu saja. Sedang di kutub lainnya, muncul orang-orang yang menganggap algoritma adalah sebuah ancaman terhadap kebebasan berpikir yang mereka miliki. Lalu muncullah perdebatan mengenai apakah manusia harus tunduk pada kuasa algoritma untuk menentukan konsumsi informasi ataukah menolak keberadaannya. Namun benarkah itu adalah masalahnya? Bisa jadi perdebatan tersebut hanya akan menghasilkan argumen-argumen yang terlalu hitam putih, jauh dari apa yang sebenarnya kita harap dan butuhkan untuk dijawab. Kita tidak perlu berada di kedua sisi secara ekstrim. Tidak bisa dipungkiri bahwa digitalisasi juga berpengaruh besar pada dunia kepenulisan, dan lebih jauh dalam kepenulisan cerita. Di satu sisi, muncul pembaca-pembaca yang terpapar berbagai jenis cerita yang ditawarkan oleh algoritma digital. Pembaca mengonsumsi cerita-cerita tersebut dan sudah menjadi rahasia umum bahwa cerita-cerita yang muncul dan meledak dengan jutaan pembaca di ranah digital kerap tidak mencerminkan kenyataan yang terjadi di masyarakat. Seperti cerita-cerita dengan plot atau karakter yang halusinatif, penuh mimpi kosong, atau bahkan mempromosikan perilaku manusia yang berlebihan seperti kekerasan seksual, hedonisme, dan materialisme. Tentu saja, hal tersebut menimbulkan kegelisahan bagi banyak pihak yang peduli pada dunia kepenulisan dan cerita yang idealnya mengedepankan martabat dan nilai-nilai kemanusiaan. Algoritma seakan-akan turut andil dalam mendorong naiknya cerita-cerita semacam itu ke permukaan. Lagi-lagi, benarkah ini adalah salah dan dosa dari sistem algoritma digital? Dalam hemat saya, fenomena ini tidak bisa dipandang dengan cara yang terlalu mengerdilkan dan menyederhanakan permasalahan. Fenomena yang terjadi lebih besar daripada itu, karena sesungguhnya cara kerja algoritma hanyalah cermin buram dari perilaku penggunanya. Salah satu yang harus dipahami sejak awal adalah cara kerja algoritma tidak akan mampu melakukan inisiatif sendiri. Algoritma digital hanya melakukan respon pada perilaku manusia yang menggunakan alat-alat digital untuk membantu mereka dalam melakukan proses pencarian. Artinya, kerja algoritma bergantung pada input-input yang sebelumnya telah dilakukan secara sengaja ataupun tidak sengaja oleh penggunanya. Apakah algoritma adalah barang baru? Sebagai sebuah sistem teknologi digital, algoritma telah dikembangkan sejak teknologi komputer diciptakan. Namun, sebagai sebuah pola pikir, model semacam ini sebenarnya adalah hal yang secara alamiah sudah dilakukan manusia sejak zaman purbakala untuk menentukan pilihan dengan mempertimbangkan kemungkinan-kemungkinan yang tersedia. Algoritma digital hanya mengumpulkan pola-pola perilaku manusia berdasarkan pilihan-pilihannya sendiri yang kemudian dijadikan dasar untuk menduga kemungkinan keputusan yang dilakukan di masa depan. Sebagai ilustrasi, jika seseorang memilih cerita anak pada 10 kesempatan, tentu saja algoritma akan menyimpulkan bahwa besar kemungkinan orang tersebut akan mencari hal yang sama pada kesempatan ke-11. Namun jika orang tersebut memilih hal yang beragam, tentu algoritma juga akan menghasilkan penawaran yang beragam. Sejauh manakah algoritma dapat bekerja? Tentu saja hanya sejauh input-input yang diterimanya, kemudian diolah secara statistik untuk menunjukkan kecenderungan pilihan. Jadi apakah algoritma bisa salah? Tentu saja bisa. Inilah sebabnya algoritma membutuhkan jumlah data yang besar agar ia mampu membuat prediksi yang lebih akurat. Semakin banyak dan luas data yang didapatkan, semakin baik kerja algoritma dalam menduga kecenderungan pilihan yang dilakukan oleh manusia. Lebih jauh, dengan banyaknya jumlah manusia yang dikumpulkan datanya, algoritma juga mampu mengumpulkan kecenderungan arah kesadaran kolektif dalam suatu masyarakat dan fenomena sosial yang mungkin sedang dan terjadi. Misalnya, menduga kemungkinan tren dan memberi penawaran pada penggunanya berdasarkan tren tersebut. Apabila individu yang ditawarkan melakukan respon seperti mengeklik sebuah tautan, algoritma akan mengumpulkannya sebagai data. Namun, apakah karena besarnya data maka dugaan yang dibuat algoritma pasti benar? Ternyata tidak juga. Mengapa? Karena algoritma bukan makhluk hidup yang seperti manusia. Algoritma tidak mampu membaca konteks dan nuansa yang muncul dari pilihan-pilihan yang dibuat manusia. Apakah manusia yang mengeklik suatu tautan tersebut pasti menginginkannya? Belum tentu. Kemauan adalah salah satu yang tidak bisa dibaca oleh algoritma. Sampai manusia sendiri yang memilih untuk memasukkannya sebagai data. Alias, manusia sendiri yang seharusnya menyadari pilihan-pilihan yang dibuatnya. Kita perlu menggarisbawahi bahwa algoritma tidak memiliki kesadarannya sendiri. Dan inilah masalah yang sebenarnya. Kesadaran yang dimiliki oleh manusia sebagai pengguna teknologi digital. Tanpa kesadaran, manusia akan terus bisa dicekoki oleh penawaran-penawaran yang dilakukan oleh algoritma digital. Algoritma hanya melakukan mirroring dari perilaku pengguna teknologi digital sendiri. Sehingga kalau kita kembali mempertanyakan apa sebabnya konten-konten cerita yang buruk semakin bertebaran, sederhana. Terdapat sejumlah besar manusia yang menggunakan kesadarannya untuk mengkonsumsi cerita kita seperti itu. Algoritma adalah pelayan untuk manusia yang bertugas mengumpulkan data dan membantu proses pencarian informasi. Namun, lewat algoritma pula, manusia yang minim kesadaran akan terpengaruh dengan adanya kemungkinan bahwa algoritma dapat dilakukan untuk kejahatan. Kesadaran manusia semakin menjadi kunci yang tidak mungkin diremehkan. Pendidikan literasi memainkan peran penting di sini. Fenomena yang terjadi di dunia kepenulisan digital hari ini adalah cermin dari keberhasilan atau sebaliknya kegagalan proses pendidikan literasi yang terjadi di masa lalu hingga detik ini. Algoritma hanya memantulkan gemanya. Kita hari ini nyaris tidak memiliki pilihan selain mengikuti perkembangan teknologi digital, termasuk bagaimana kecerdasan artifisial berevolusi untuk memenuhi kebutuhan manusia. Namun, seperti banyak hal lainnya, teknologi bisa menjadi pedang bermata dua jika tidak diiringi oleh pengetahuan, kesadaran, dan sikap bijak dalam penggunaannya. Proses pendidikan inilah yang tidak mungkin digantikan oleh teknologi digital. Pendidikan literasi perlu dilakukan sebagai proses antar manusia oleh semua pemangku kepentingan, pemerintah, penulis, pembaca, dan seluruh pelaku industri. Apa yang kelak terjadi dengan cerita-cerita di masa depan adalah hasil dari tindakan dan proses pendidikan literasi yang kita lakukan hari ini. Kepenulisan, sastra, dan cerita-cerita selalu dan akan selalu mengenai manusia. Dan bagaimana nasibnya kelak tetap akan ada di tangan manusia. Ada atau tidak ada algoritma. Apakah algoritma adalah ancaman bagi dunia kepenulisan dan cerita di masa depan? Kitalah yang akan menentukannya sendiri. Hari ini, apakah kita sebagai penulis, pembaca, dan penikmat cerita perlu khawatir bahwa algoritma akan mendikte bagaimana cara kita memandang eksistensi dan identitas kita? Jawabannya tidak. Selama sistem pendidikan secara umum dan pendidikan literasi mampu digunakan untuk membangun kesadaran manusia akan dunia tempat mereka berada. Karena pada akhirnya teknologi tidak akan lebih dari sosok pelayan untuk manusia dan kemanusiaannya dengan kesadaran bahwa kita adalah tuannya. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mas Ega. I think that's very interesting that it's not the machine per se,
Yes.
but also the human beings who use the machine, right? So do we have a chance? Do we have a chance to reclaim the space? Do we have a chance? Do human beings do we have a chance to sort of like maybe take over or revolt maybe I don't know and uh, control the space? So that's the big questions everyone has, I think, right now. So this will be a very nice flow into our next speaker, Richa Kaulpate. Let me read her short biography. Richa Kaulpate is a writer, editor, and author of Cyber Sexy, Rethinking Pornography, published by Penguin Random House India. The book is an in-depth exploration of online sex cultures in South Asia and beyond. She is co-founder of the award-winning long-form publication Deep Dives, and her writing has appeared in several places including BuzzFeed, Vice, GQ, Cracked, Hazlitt, National Geographic Traveler, and Rolling Stone. You can read Richa's work in richakalpate.com. Impressive. Uh, I'll give the floor to Richa. Please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you can hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. I like that we've been talking about the possibilities of reclaiming space, and sort of towards that effect, I'm going to talk about the experiences of Indian women when it comes to sex, pornography, and technology in a way that hopefully ties into the theme of our panel today. Why realities shape our stories, but also why stories shape what we are able to see and accept as part of reality. So when we think about pornography, if you think about pornography, I think we, or popular culture, perceives it to be like one main story. It's something made by men, for men, and that often involves the oppression of women. And I think this was a story I also believed in a lot until I started working at a women's rights organization in 2011, where I was introduced to the idea of sexual rights, the human right sort of to pursue pleasure free from harm, no matter how non-normative your desires are. And around the same time, I also became very interested in sexuality in the digital era. So what does it mean to be a sexual person online, or to have sexual rights while using technology? And then 2013 comes around, and here in India, we had 2 petitions that year to ban pornography. So currently, it's illegal to make or distribute pornography in India, but these petitions wanted to make viewing or consuming sexual content online illegal as well. And I mean, these bans, they said a lot of things. I mean, they were very overblown. They compared pornography to Hitler, they compared pornography to AIDS. But the one thing that really kept coming up was the idea of women, that Indian women needed to be protected from pornography. But what never actually came up in these conversations were the voices or the realities or the stories of any actual Indian women, which made me think all around the world, porn bans and laws around sex and technology hold that pornography, like sex, is the property of men. And that the only way to change this narrative is for us as women to actually start talking about it. To shift the terms of the debate, I think we actually have to be a part of the debate, and that we need to stake our claim to these spaces online before they are banned in our names. And that's when I started working on my book to change the story around porn and sex and tech in India. Because this time around, I really wanted to include lots and lots of women. So I guess sort of bring it to the theme of the panel a bit more, what does changing a story mean? And I think it's sort of looking at what the main story is. And I think there's a popular idea that the internet sent pornography into overdrive. But that's not really true, because if you think about it, the pornography industry in America had its heyday back in the 70s. But what is true is that the internet has allowed sexual content to reach a much wider audience, easily, affordably, and also anonymously. And I mean, in India, it's true that so many digitally connected people are making their way online every day to read, watch, write, or upload sexual content. And this really includes women and gender minorities whose offline sexual lives are often tightly curtailed by their families and their communities. So, for example, I'll just give you two little examples. I spoke to one woman called Sonali, and she grew up in the UAE. And growing up, she sort of felt an attraction towards girls, but she didn't know what that meant. She thought, oh, maybe that means I just want to be best friends with them. But luckily, she had access to a VPN, which was the only way to access the unsupervised internet when she was growing up there. And she stumbled onto an internet forum discussion titled, How Do Lesbians Have Sex? And through this, she had conversations, and later sex chats that allowed her to understand her desires and also to find communities that made her feel less alone. And I think this is something that comes up a lot, is that the internet, despite its failings and despite its algorithmic restrictions, has allowed a lot of people to feel less alone. Because I think desire itself can be a terribly lonely space if you think you're the only person out there. And I think parts of the internet have facilitated a sort of community for people. I think I'll just give you one more example, is that I spoke with a girl who grew up in a small industrial town in India in a very conservative family where talking about sex was absolutely impossible. And she didn't really have a sense of her sexual self. But at college, she discovered camming websites where people, I don't know if you're familiar with camming websites, but it's where people from around the world perform from their own bedrooms. And here she used to watch women performing sex shows. And that was very revolutionary for her because it was the first time she realized that sex was just another part of life. And that is something she'd never experienced before, this normalizing of sex. And I think many other women who perform online, and Malini herself started performing at some point, expressed this to me, that the experience of their bodies and sexualities was not only acceptable, but was also desirable, that who or what they wanted was not wrong. Something I get asked a lot is, okay, but does this really count as porn? And that's something I asked myself a lot too. Is pornography only something shot in a studio by professional actors, or does it include webcams, sex chats, virtual realities, and all the different types of sexual encounters and expressions that I found while researching this book, and I'm sure many of you have experienced online as well? I think the way we define porn, or even our drive to define porn, is very much linked to power. And rethinking pornography for me has meant not only asking what counts as porn, but who has the power to do that counting. For example, online, it's women's sexual expression, or even just the presentations of their bodies from, say, nipples or stray pubic hair from swimsuits that gets them banned from Instagram as pornographic. Whether these are algorithms doing it or people or a combination of the two, I think what we do see uniformly across the board on social media is that men's bodies are allowed much, much more freedom. I think people in power, whether they're governments, internet platforms, or the various forms that morality police take around the world, I'm sure you have your own, we've got a whole lot in India, are deciding what counts as porn versus what is art, erotica, fashion, literature. And I think these decisions are a way of preserving power and deeming essentially everyone who isn't a straight, cisgender, white, or in the case of India, upper caste man, inappropriate by virtue of their bodies or desires. So I think a big part of what I tried to do with this book was to understand what pornography can look like if we reject the status quo. I think porn is very many things as there are human desires. And if stories shape our realities just as much as realities shape our stories, then I was hoping as an Indian woman to try and call in a lot of other women into the conversation around what counts as porn and what we collectively believe it can include. Which also, makes me wonder, if we step out, be many things too. And I think to answer this question, and perhaps in line with what our last speaker was saying, is that it's more useful to look at what people are actually drawn to in their reading and writing habits, rather than what they think they should be drawn to. I think there is a big difference between what we actually value and what we say we value. And I think just like the arbitrary definitions of porn, this gap comes down to the way in which morality and other forms of power try and control our decisions and lives. One of the chapters I most enjoyed researching in my book was about reading and writing. I interviewed lots and lots of people who read or write erotica and fan fiction online to understand what it is these spaces mean to them. And I realized that for many people figuring out their sexuality, especially young people or people coming from perhaps more conservative backgrounds or contexts, visual porn can feel very overwhelming. In comparison, sexual words offer a gentler space for pleasure and discovery. And I spoke to so many people, especially women, who post their sexy stories online, on fan forums or erotica websites. And while reading their stories, it is so amazing to see the diversity and voices of the desires expressed. There's a really long history of women being perceived as unreliable narrators of their own bodies and experiences. And I think with the internet now, so many women have found this very, I want to say, large and actually, contrary to popular opinion, often welcoming home in which to write, to read, or to experience sexual pleasure and to share that with the world. And I just want to quote one woman I interviewed who said, I enjoy that the writers might be folks who would not ever think of publishing. So imagine, here's a population that would most likely not be heard, whose excellent writing would not see daylight if it were not for the vehicle of the internet. If there's one main porn story, I also think there's one or maybe a handful of main literature stories where literature is something that takes a certain structural form, and that form is usually determined by the industry's publishers. And I think, as we saw with our last speaker, Mr. Yotenega, I'm probably not saying that right, is that what people are seeking out online is different often from what the industry's publishers say, the industry publishers say counts as real literature. And I think for me, researching and writing this book really expanded my own ideas of what counts as literature and as legitimate writing. And part of that expansion is linked to rejecting what the establishment says is legitimate and considering instead what people at the margins often are reading and writing on their own terms. So lastly, all of this are ultimately playing on someone else's field, a field that is privately owned and developed by the same people who have always historically held power, and that these platforms have, at least I believe they have, been created for their profit and not for our benefit. And I think this definitely influences what we create, what we experience, and how others perceive us as well. So for example, we're talking about alternative stories, but as we saw from our first speaker, is that in many ways, the corporate internet now feeds our own story back to us, especially on social media. And it's that idea of the filter bubbles that we're algorithmically served up content that is most likely to reinforce our existing views. In this way, I guess nothing is an alternative story, or everything is, because what you see on your phone is entirely likely different from what I see on mine. And when this difference is determined by massive corporations, I'm personally not sure if that's something to always celebrate. I think also, instead of freeing marginalized identities, the internet sometimes further codifies them in oppressive ways. So for example, if we look at facial recognition software, across Google, IBM, and various companies, facial recognition software often identifies Black women as men or Black people as other than human. And so while on the one hand, the internet has allowed Black people across the world to present their realities and to collectively organize, the very structure of the commercial internet they are organizing on often works to deny their humanity. So I think this is something that I tell myself as well as someone who writes and researches what the internet means to people and the ways in which they explore sexuality on it, that it's very important to be careful when talking about the internet, especially the internet as it's developed in the last 5 or 10 years, to talk about freedom and possibility, or at least to consider the ways the corporate internet and commercial social media are shaping these possibilities, as Mulya indicated in his talk as well. So when we imagine future realities, what's key for me is to imagine something that exists outside of the logic of profit, whether it's sex or pleasure or renting. I did really like that idea about unionizing. That's always nice to see, and it never occurred to me that that would be possible for social media users. Because I do think there was actually a moment in time when the internet did open up unstructured possibilities and multiple narratives. I guess before Mark Zuckerberg took over the internet, there were things like chat rooms and uncensored Tumblr and sites that weren't mining or tracking our every move. And I don't want to say let's go back to the past, but I would love it if we could find our way towards something that felt less singularly controlled. Because if we really want to create room for diverse stories, we shouldn't have to do it, I think, on a massive corporation's terms. That's a future reality that I would really love to see. Yeah, I'm done.
Thanks so much. It's great. Like yes, so there is a possibility. There is a chance that we can use internet to challenge status quo. Uh, we actually at the moment have one question from YouTube, but this conversation between the three of you actually is I want to dig more into that first before I ask that question. So I want to ask Mas Muli, what do you think about, because your presentation seems like this is a big machine, evil big bad wolf, uh, that, and then we are kind of sort of like maybe helpless, and sort of like just follow the machine. But and then Mas Ega that uh question that, and then Richa beautifully like tell us that yes, it's possible to challenge the status quo. So you as a person who deals with big data, uh is this kind of like unions or like a platform like Mas Ega made, ya, nulisbuku.com, is probably my guess is maybe it's they are not that big in numbers, but would it mean something to our future, you think?
Well, ultimately, users are what companies, including social media companies, tech companies, look for, right? They look for users, and they look for active users, right? And for a long time, many people, didn't realize it that it's oh, this is so great. We can use all these facilities for free. Wow, right? It's so good. It's so kind of them. And then people have realized that it's not really for free. There is a trade-off, right? There's a take and give, and of course, what you give is the data, your attention, your most valuable is your attention, because then you can have ads, third parties paying for your attention, which is fine, right? We do that. That's something that in the traditional media we do as well. But in the traditional media, it's clear when it's a sponsored content, when it's an advertisement. Nowadays in social media, it's becoming more clear. So if it's a sponsored content, then it says that it's sponsored content, right? But ultimately, yes, these companies, they are companies, and I wouldn't say that they are evil. They are just companies trying to make money. A lot of money have been invested in these companies, right? They're just like any other company. They're just trying to make money. Some companies succeed at making more money. Some companies succeed at making less money. Some companies succeed at making humongous amounts of money. Do we blame them, right? No, we don't necessarily blame them for being successful, but we may blame them if it's unfair. For example, are the terms and conditions clear? Is there an option to exit? Is there alternative options rather than one? So it's not a monopoly. So these are the workings that to ensure that there's a kind of like a market mechanism at work to control the companies, right? To prevent them from being too big, for example, by competition, by other things. But then, of course, when the market doesn't work, when some of these companies may have been too big, when they have violated our trust or are not working fairly, then it's time for the government to step in, right? I mean, the government should help to correct these kind of market failures. And can we really call it market failure? Well, at the moment, that's a debatable term, but it's going towards that. But on the other hand, we can see that we haven't had the chance to regulate them. The companies, the technology, the forms of these social media, they've developed so fast, and the government who's supposed to regulate them are just trailing behind, right? So yeah, so we can do that. I mean, like, ultimately these companies are based in a country, and they have to listen to the government of that.
Okay, so maybe Richa or Mas Ega would like to comment about government step in, because what Richa and Ega been doing is very non-government, I think, not very government at all. They're talking about more like about how people find a space and then try to correct me if I'm wrong, and then try to challenge the status quo, like what Richard said about, like, let's not let's go outside the profit logic. You said something about market, how we as consumers have to be more critical, but can we do more than that? Can we, as Richard said, like, step outside the logic of profit? Maybe Richard or Ega would like to comment on that. Maybe Richa. Okay, please, Richa.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I wonder, and I'm sorry, Mulia Amri, how do I say your name? I feel like I just need to be able to say it correctly.
That's
is that okay?
sorry,
okay.
I was still on mute.
Yeah,
You said it correctly.
Mulia, is that your first name?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I was interested, sorry, about profit, you asked me. Yeah, can we actually, I said I would love for us to move outside the logic of profit, but I wonder if there are, you spoke a lot about social media, but if there is any hope, I mean, I hope there is, for us to maybe go towards companies or use platforms that are not dictated by the logic of commercial social media. And I wonder what you think about that, because I think for me, as I was researching this book, like, so many of the spaces that I found to be most transformative, or let's say people found to be most transformative, was not commercial social media. And I realized that even those spaces are getting smaller and fewer and far between, but I wonder if there's any possibility to go towards them. Because just to sort of come back to what you were saying about, like, that these companies are not regulated, like, I agree, they're absolutely not. And I'm actually quite worried as to whether we can regulate them, because I know we have like the Internet Governance Forum and things like that, but it's almost like we're what they'd call in the pandemic backwards contact tracing, because we're trying to fix a problem that's already there. These companies have been set up, they've already got their fingers in so many pies, and now we're sort of wondering, like, oh, how can we regulate them? And I wonder what you or any of the panelists think about the fact that it might actually be too late to regulate them, and maybe we should be looking for spaces that are not so governed by, you know, these massive corporations, or let's say the same corporation who seems to have like all the platforms.
Molly, do you want to comment? Because if you like to comment, please. But and then I will give to the floor to Mas Ega to explain more about nulisbuku.com, as I want to hear his stories about the platform and how he see that maybe the platform can change the stories or
Sure.
challenge status quo. But please, you first.
Okay,
Mas Muli first. Okay. So.
All right. I'll try to keep it brief, but it's a bit hard to expect for-profit companies who have attracted investment, lots of investment, to go not pursue that much profit, right? I mean, it's their job to be profitable, and if these companies, including, you know, not just the big ones, right? There are many tech companies, big and small. If they're profitable, then they can hire more people, and that's what we like. So we want them to be profitable, right? So, but we want them to be profitable ethically, right? So that's where the government can step in. Now, the thing is, okay, I'll try to keep this very brief, and maybe if anyone picks it up, we can discuss it further later. The reach of these technologies are worldwide, but the companies, they are regulated by the government where they are registered, right? So there's actually a mismatch between the reach of these companies, which is global, and to whom they are accountable, right? They are accountable directly. Well, the government where they are based at, they can make the rules for them. So that's something of a mismatch that I think we still need to work on.
So I will give Mas Ega. Please tell us more about your platform.
Okay, I will tell my platform, storyal.co ya, not nulisbuku.com, because storyal.co mempunyai member yang lebih banyak dan mungkin lebih growth-nya mungkin lebih tinggi secara pertumbuhan anggotanya. Memang saya jadi ingat kenapa pada awal-awal Google didirikan itu motonya don't be evil, jangan menjadi jahat. Karena setelah 10 tahun berada di industri ini, kita tahu bahwa untuk menjadi jahat gampang banget gitu. Untuk menjadi profit minded only gitu sangat mudah, dan artinya tidak memikirkan apakah akibat-akibat yang ditimbulkan. Let's say dengan platform yang kami punya, ada satu kasus misalnya bagaimana membedakan antara sebuah cerita itu pornografi atau sastra yang indah gitu. Bagaimana sebuah kegiatan seksual ditulis dengan cara indah atau yang menjurus ke pornografi, itu akan sulit sekali mengaturnya gitu. Jadi makanya tadi salah satu harapan yang harus kita lakukan adalah mengedukasi. Tidak ada jalan pintas untuk mengatur itu semua. Karena sejujurnya misalnya kita membiarkan di platform storyal.co itu semua orang boleh menulis cerita dengan sebebas-bebasnya. Pasti follower atau penggunanya akan jauh lebih banyak daripada seperti yang kami lakukan sekarang. Ada regulasi, ada pembatasan, ada filterisasi dari tim editorial. Itu sebenarnya secara profit tidak menguntungkan dalam tanda kutip. Karena akan membuat banyak orang yang kesukaannya dibatasin. Namun yang kami lakukan itu tadi bagaimana kita memikirkan akibat-akibat platform yang kita ciptakan ini tidak berdampak buruk terhadap masyarakat. Seperti yang kita yakini, kita memberlakukan filter, batasan-batasan, kita punya tim editorial yang akan menurunkan atau memblok cerita-cerita yang mungkin tidak sesuai dengan apa yang kami yakini benar. Itu sih.
That's interesting. How would you make sure that your filter would not become another like sort of like a regime, like moral regime, like Facebook,
Ya,
like Facebook and other.
ya itu memang katanya Pram, kita harus adil sejak dalam pikiran itu memang tidak mudah. Jadi kita punya banyak tim yang selalu berdebat tentang hal itu. Artinya dalam satu kasus, apakah cerita ini layak diteruskan atau kita turunkan? Itu tidak mudah.
That's
Namun,
interesting.
ya, tetapi kami selalu memberikan edukasi kepada para pengguna kami. Kita mengadakan banyak pelatihan-pelatihan dengan beberapa contoh kasus yang kita lakukan. Kenapa cerita ini tidak boleh dan cerita ini boleh? Apa perbedaannya? Dan edukasi itu kami akan lakukan terus-menerus.
That's interesting about that. Your team debate what should be allowed and not should be sort of like I kind of like don't want to use this word censored, maybe not censored, but how you regulate your platform, right? So is how diverse is your team? Does it have like men and women, liberal, conservatives, all religions, for example?
Yes. Sebisa mungkin akan sangat banyak variasi ideologi, latar belakang, gender misalnya. Itu ada dalam tim saya. Membuat perdebatan itu menarik. Kadang-kadang kita tidak serta-merta menurunkan tanpa penjelasan, tapi kita bisa menghubungi penulisnya, bisakah cerita seperti ini diperhalus? Karena kita bahwa ini adalah mesti konsensual nih. Jangan sampai seperti pemerkosaan misalnya. Itu kan cerita fiksi nih, bukan fakta. Kita bisa haluskan. Seperti itu sih. Edukasi semacam itu yang kita lakukan ke penulis.
That's interesting. Okay. So far very interesting, but I received more questions. So okay. Two questions are for Mas Muli, but because this is more about a little about Indonesian politics, I guess. So I will read a question for Richa first. So internet does give a chance to marginalized groups to be heard, but still there are gaps on how someone are accepted by the online audience. Yeah. So is internet really providing a chance to give bigger platform, or is it like a chance for them to be cyberbullied, for example? Maybe if that's the question, I think. So is it really, you think, marginalized group? Internet can really give marginalized group a bigger platform? That's for Richa.
Thank you for that question. I do think it's a bit of a tricky one because I think that the internet has allowed some marginalized people to express themselves in new ways. But I do think that the internet, it's important to remember that it is a space, and it is a space that still exists in our society. So it's not that what happens on the internet is different from what happens offline. And so the same sorts of hierarchies, the same sorts of prejudices and the privileges of the offline world do go online as well. And so I think it's a really good question because I do think, yes, it has provided some marginalized people with opportunities, but I do think at the same time, it replicates the sort of advantages that certain people have offline. And again, I kind of, don't think that like it was said before, I don't think, like Malia said before, I don't think that there's that for-profit companies are going to stop making profit, or they're going to be like, oh, let's make less money. But I do think that there are still spaces that are perhaps not as profitable, but they are giving opportunities, or let's say not discriminating against people with non-normative experiences or desires. And I know I come back to Instagram a lot, but I think that's because I look at pornography and Instagram is a very visual medium. The sorts of people and posts that have been banned from Instagram is often like fat women, gay couples, we're looking at the same sort of replication of the prejudices that exist offline. Whereas camming websites, and there's loads of them, feel free to look them up, you see a wider range of bodies and desires that are possible. And I mean, I don't know how closely this is linked to the question of profit. I tend to think most things are, but I do think that there are spaces where marginalized people have more opportunities than they do on commercial social media.
Okay, so next question is, because it's still close to the topic we're talking about right now, is from Boni Rambatan. But most spaces outside the profit motive have tragically been overtaken by the alt-right, far-right, and other toxic communities, right? Relating to your topic, Richa, sexual emancipation of women and other genders online always come alongside male rage, which leads to so much toxicity and a normalization of violence precisely in these spaces. On the other hand, an increasingly right-leaning governments and tech, such as facial recognition and location tracking, just exacerbates these conditions. How do you see a way out of this, if any? That's the question.
Is that to me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Right. Have most spaces outside of profit been tragically taken over by alt-right groups? I think
I don't know.
certainly, but I think no, I mean, I think it's maybe I'm asking the rhetorical question, but I also think that maybe what we've been talking about, filter bubbles, and the idea that what we see online, for example, in terms of the elections, as we were seeing in the first, in the presentation, is that we see different things. So I think that even mainstream groups that are for profit definitely have a lot of far right and other toxic communities. But I will, and I mean, I guess maybe I don't know if I'm a little naive on this, but I really do believe that there are spaces, like, for example, I love the fact, like, let's say the erotica communities and things like that, where I do think that there are a lot of possibilities for women that are not completely overrun by male rage. But I think I will say lastly that online or offline, I think the sexual emancipation of women has always been accompanied by male rage. I don't think that is something being produced by the internet. I think that's something that we've seen historically across the world when it comes to women's liberation. And yeah, I mean, I know you're asking if I see a way out of this, but God, I don't know. I don't know what the way out of this is. I think that I'm hopeful again that we can find alternative spaces, that there's some sort of hopes for decentralized internets. But I'm not a technology person and I don't have concrete answers here at all. But I would love to hear of alternatives that are happening, hopefully, or that people are working towards.
Okay, so I would like to ask the same question to Mas Muli. Is there a way out of this? And because there's one question for you, and I think this will probably be pertaining to the maybe the answer you will give is, maybe you can also
It's not my answer. It's unfortunate that we have gone as slow as America in terms of political polarization. Well, maybe not as slow, but almost as low. That's what's unfortunate. But can we take it back? Can we turn the tide? I mean, I'm looking at that survey where we saw in Japan, there's actually more people who thought social media was actually improving social cohesion rather than tearing people apart. Can we learn something from there? And of course, we can have a lot of discussion about why it's like that in Japan. But it goes down to education. our education system, for example, if we choose to be a democracy with freedom of information, uh, uh, media, can we at least have it embedded in our schools to try to have a habit of learning to see from another person's point of view? That is a very basic trait or skill that is taught in, for example, some international baccalaureate programs, right? For example, role playing. Okay, let's have a role playing. Let's have a debate class. We're going to have a healthy debate. Okay, you be pro Trump, or you be Mbak Evi, you be anti-Trump, and then I'll be pro-Trump, right? And then I cannot say no, 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 I'm anti-Trump. Don't give me pro-Trump. But that's actually this kind of exercises. Now, you know what? You now have to pretend that you are pro-Trump or whatever it is that you believe or disbelieve. Uh, wholeheartedly. Can you try to see it from another person's point of view? And unfortunately, our education system, in some way, we have become, for the past few years, and I'm actually quite hopeful at the new approach that the current Minister of Education has on, but that still needs to be seen, right? But the concept seems promising, that to be more, have freedom in terms of how you learn, seeing from different sides, different points of views, using different materials and tools as your learning material. So that's, I think education is part of it. The government can definitely play a part in improving the education if we are going to choose to be a democracy, and with a good extent of media and information freedom. Then there has to be major efforts at improving our education, including building up digital literacy. And some of the social media companies now have also realized that they also want to fix their image. They're now also building information, digital literacy trainings, working with the government. We need to see that happen in much more bigger scale, including to get the people to understand when they say yes to a social media contract, what is it that they're saying yes to, right? If you upload photos, what does it mean? So these kind of things, like social media companies need to play a part to train the users or to be users in terms of how the game actually works, so people can make um, judgments, judgments that they decisions that have been considered thoroughly. And that's something that needs to be worked out together. And so there was this other question that you mentioned, right, about the social polarization. I think I've answered that.
Yes, you answered it. It's
Yeah.
it's it's as bad as US. Is that
I,
your answer, right?
I think it's 11 and 12, or like it's not
11
that
and
far,
12, 11,
not that far,
12.
not that far behind. Unfortunately, it's we shouldn't be going that way. We should be going towards like the examples like Japan rather than the US, for example, right? And there's
Mm.
also this question about lobbying, right?
Mm.
I say everyone has a right to lobby. Companies have a right to lobby. You and I each have a right to lobby. Just meet up with one of the policymakers. Um,
Let's make unions, just like
let's make
Richard
or
said,
make
right?
unions. Yeah, the weapons of, if you're not strong enough to meet with a policymaker, then you need to band up together and form a union. That
Yeah.
way and then you can sit together, have meetings, and then the companies will say, oh, that union of users is lobbying the government. I mean, everybody has a right to lobby. It's for us. It's organizing skills that needs to be improved.
Yeah, I think I would rather way out. Is there a way out? Yes. And I would rather unionize or organize ourselves and then reclaim our space or revolt, other than depending on government to step in or educating. I think, but yeah, but yeah, that's interesting. I think so. So, Mas Ega, do you think is there a way out? Adakah jalan keluar? Is there a way out? And is you think like writers, authors, organizing themselves in a platform using digital tools can be one of the way out, for example.
Ya, seperti yang saya tuliskan di esai bahwa kami di perusahaan yang kami jalankan, kami punya pengharapan akan masa depan tentang polarisasi ini. Salah satunya adalah dengan membuat cerita-cerita yang balance gitu. Artinya kami sebagai pemilik platform bagaimana sebisa mungkin mengantarkan cerita-cerita yang beragam sehingga pembaca-pembaca juga mendapatkan paparan-paparan cerita-cerita yang bervariasi di masing-masing pemahaman gitu kan. Menurut saya begitu sih.
Okay, so yeah, so your platform provides make sure that the stories you publish are diverse. So you have religious stories like ayat-ayat cinta, for example.
Yeah, of course.
And do you have erotica as well?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
I'll fix it.
Yang paling laris itu.
Oh, okay.
Salah satu yang paling laris.
Okay, erotica is like the most sought after. That's great. And diverse sexual orientation, or is it?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, great.
Could I just say something?
Sure.
I mean, Yotenega, I don't think I'm saying your name correctly. Brilliant.
Let's call him Ega. Just call him
Ega.
Ega, yeah.
Well, I think that's like really great, actually, and maybe this is partly what I was trying to ask, if there are spaces where there's a different way of organizing, where there's a different way of sharing your experiences and your stories that are not, say, making an Instagram post and not putting up on Facebook and not making a Twitter thread. And like, I mean, I just think that there are platforms like yours that obviously, like, you have your own rules, you have your own filter, and you do various things. But again, like, I feel like that's, for me at least, maybe that is a way out. Like, actually what you're doing in your work is a way out, because it's not relying on the logic of, God, I keep saying the logic of profit, but clearly that's something I'm quite against. And I just think that obviously you are a company, but it's just not these massive corporations that exist across the world. And maybe this sort of like localized alternative platforms are providing a way forward. And I just wanted to say that I really liked what you have going on.
So Heidi, I have a question for the three of you. Going back to the theme of our panel, which is the future of stories. So if reality is like depending on your screen, there are so many realities in this world. Isn't that actually good, right? Like diverse. Maybe Ega, Richa, and Mas Muli can. I'll give it to Ega first.
Ya, menurut saya realitas yang kita sadari tidak sama dengan kenyataan itu juga terjadi sebelum adanya media sosial. Mungkin sebelumnya pemilih-pemilih berita yang menyajikan reality di media itu segelintir orang, mungkin di televisi. Mungkin zaman Orde Baru kita tahu bahwa ya pemilih-pemilih kontennya ya cuma itu. Ada dulu namanya Departemen Penerangan. Itu ada algoritma yang menentukan berita seperti apa yang muncul di masyarakat. Realitas seperti apa yang diinginkan, yang dipahami oleh masyarakat. Namun setelah reformasi terjadi, kita mengalami percepatan pertumbuhan informasi, dan sekarang algoritma yang menentukan bahwa realitas itu sekarang. Makanya tadi saya bilang bahwa yang harus kita lakukan adalah manusia harus memiliki kesadaran bahwa apa yang kita lihat, consciousness ya, apa yang kita lihat mungkin, jadi selalu ada pertanyaan refleksi, mungkin tidak sama seperti yang terjadi. Jadi menempatkan diri kita di sepatu orang lain, di kepala orang lain supaya kita bisa melihat lebih wide, lebih fair, lebih bijak untuk mengambil keputusan diri sendiri at least.
Okay, so if you suggest that we read stories that are not exactly in line with our own perspective, to have our awareness open up and our insight is more diverse, but it comes down to the filter, the filter bubble again, right? The echo chamber again, Mas Muli. So is there any way we can sort of like it's okay to have a lot of stories with maybe diverse realities, or as long as each of us can access all of them, or there's dialogue between realities and not just like separate bubbles?
Right.
Maybe.
So, do I get to go first or Richard first?
Yeah, I'm like segueing to you.
Okay.
Actually.
All right then. Actually, these algorithms, right? It has been around since also electronically since the era of TV dramas, Indonesian TV dramas. I used to have a friend who worked at television stations, and he knows all the ratings of each television station by the second. So at which hour and which second, how many people was watching this TV station, how many people was watching the other one, and apparently they found out that the TV shows and TV stations that gained the most attention, or people were watching the channels, were those where domestic violence activities were taking place. Like, for example, a husband was slapping, the son or daughter, and then the son or daughter, sorry to be graphic, fell on the floor and then crying. It very much captured the attention of the viewers, whether they liked it or not. And these ratings, then the TV shows know that, oh, these kind of shows people like. Well, of course people like, you're playing with their emotions, right? But should you be doing that ethically? And the same thing is happening with these social media algorithms. Of course, we can find any information that we want, we can have any reality that we want, but the problem is that once you have declared to these platforms of your reality, then the platforms will keep on giving you things that reinforce that reality, and not not show things that defy your perception. Things that you don't like, they don't give it anymore. I don't know, maybe it should be these regulations could be as simple as, out of 10 suggestions that are given by the algorithms based on your preferences, these platforms should at least show 2 or 3 out of 10 at least, right? Things that don't particularly align with the person's stated beliefs and stance, political stance, or whatever, right? So I don't know, maybe like I wouldn't call it public, public service announcement, but in a way, it is doing public service. You are educating the people by using the power that you have. You have the power to give these bits and pieces of information to the users, and they could have chosen to go into any reality that they want, but once they've gone into that rabbit hole, it's that reality. At least have a social responsibility to show information that not necessarily align with what they have defined as their beliefs. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be explored, right? In terms of how do we regulate these. Of course, there's the role of the government, there's the role of the civil society, there's the role of the educators and such. The role of the companies themselves as part of their corporate social responsibility as well.
Okay, so Richa, do you want to jump into the discussion, please?
Sure. I think I've forgotten the initial question, so maybe I just respond to what Mulia said last, since I remember that. But it's this question of social responsibility and what platforms can do, and I think that's a really great idea. But I think I sort of have this question or thought based on what you were saying earlier as well, is that social responsibility, it isn't particularly profitable, is it? So, I mean, they can, instead of showing me 10 suggestions that they know I would like, show me 3 that I won't like. But if what they try to capture is my attention and the likelihood of me actually clicking on something, why would they show me those 3? Because they know she's not going to want those 3. I'm going to go for all those 10 because, like you said, attention is money. This is the attention economy and they want to keep mine. So why would they reduce that by whatever 30%? In the same way, I guess what you were saying earlier about the terms and services, terms and conditions, right? And like trying to make them more accessible. I know some companies have tried or have done things, but I do think ultimately the fact that these platforms, terms and conditions are so inaccessible, it's not a failure in the design so much as it is the design itself. The fact that it takes like 80 pages to read through and no one's going to do that is what they're banking on, right? Because it means that I can upload my selfie and not know of all the possible users it can have. And if they truly were to take that social responsibility and explain it to me, then would I still share that? And I think that there's, so, I mean, I mean, maybe I am quite cynical and like I don't have a lot of faith in these platforms, but yeah, sorry, I feel like I've definitely lost the thread of the original question.
It's okay, it's okay. It's okay. I think, yeah, I agree with you, Richa. I mean, like, you cannot expect us to be, all of us, to be smart and read all the fine print and then blame the users when we are like, we don't realize uh that we made a mistake by agreeing. I agree with you, Richard. That's just like how it's designed. Like I myself, I have to admit that I just like scroll down and click agree. I'm it's it's kind of like not that easy to like understand the especially if we are not a legal expert. Yeah. So, okay, moving on to more questions. This is a question from, wait, I saw one. Okay, from, from Ishan. Considering how everyone is talking about profit and non-profit, is the internet then still considered a public space? What do you think? Maybe short answer from all of you. Is it still a public space? Muli?
Well, the internet is a public space, but social media are not really public space. Like they're quasi public space. So if you're talking about all kinds of websites and applications that are out there, yes, it is sort of a public space.
So Ega
but
or
not
Richard,
specific social media.
Okay, you
agree with Mulia.
Okay.
Ya, ketika masuk dalam satu platform itu udah ranahnya perusahaan sih.
Oh, okay. So the internet is the space itself is public, but platform is not. Okay, Richa, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
it gives us a if I can. Sorry, Richa, you did I cut you in? Okay, thanks. This is kind of like a similar topic in the urban field. We talk about malls, right? Malls. Is a mall a public space, right? And some people say, you can do a lot of things that are typically you can be done in public, but actually it's not, right? It's public. It's private space. There are clear rules and regulations, and you don't have a say in deciding those rules.
Yeah. You're right. It's a quasi or pseudo public space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I just sorry.
Sure.
Add something about. I just thought of it. I've not thought of it, but the question of apps, right? Like, I think you're totally right. Is that these platforms are not public spaces or quasi-public spaces? But what is this internet that's still a public space? Because I think increasingly the way we access the internet is through apps or applications on our phones, and those don't feel very public at all. Like the space again, quasi-public, but that open sort of wide space of the internet, just like typing something into like the World Wide Web or even the internet beyond that is sort of shrinking, I think, in part because of how we access it. And I think the more we access it through apps, the more our experience of the internet is boxed into these quasi-public spaces or private spaces, as opposed to what could be more potentially public spaces online.
Interesting point. But let's move on to another question from Avianti Arman. With the existence of the echo chamber, although the internet opens up space for many people to talk, as well as marginalized groups, how can they reach readers who have been divided into spaces controlled by groups or people who have controlled the space? How to change this situation? Like, okay, we give the marginalized platform, but how this is shared and distributed widely?
If I can take a little jab at that, I think that's the key, right? That is what the companies want. They want you to use their platforms and be part of their private or quasi public private space or quasi public space, and that's what all companies want. They want as many users as possible, because once you have the users, then you can control your terms, right? And those who already have that many users, they can control the terms. And it's becoming, the issue is a big, how do you control, how do they access it? It's something that I don't have an answer, but that is something that the companies are chasing. All companies want to have the most number of users so they can dominate the market.
So, Ega, so how's your platform try to reach out like as much as audience?
5 tahun yang lalu kami tidak tahu bahwa penulis-penulis di Indonesia, terutama yang di luar Pulau Jawa, itu banyak sekali. Teman-teman penulis muda di luar Pulau Jawa itu banyak sekali. Ketika kami membuka Storyal, sekarang kita mengenali banyak sekali penulis-penulis muda yang berpotensi. Karena kami platformnya platform cerita, jadi selama dan mempunyai skill menulis yang bagus, kami akan memberikan kesempatan seluas-luasnya buat mereka. Bahkan kita mengadakan kompetisi menulis setiap bulan, dan kami menemukan banyak sekali talenta-talenta di luar Pulau Jawa, dan itu sangat menyenangkan. Bahkan secara pendapatan 10 besar di Storyal itu kebanyakan di luar Pulau Jawa, dan itu sangat menyenangkan menemukan talenta-talenta baru.
Wow, it's really great to hear that, Ega. So your stories are like how many percent can you say from outside Java? Richa, may I explain that Java is the most developed island in Indonesia?
Hampir berimbang malahan.
Oh, okay. So 50% from Java
45,
and 50%.
55.
That's great, actually. Yeah. So Ega's platform has more and more voices outside Java, because we're like our presidents are all from Java, and so it's kind of like a big thing that the platform, that the platform can. So, but how do you make sure it reach as many people and as wide as possible? How?
Sebelum pandemi kami melakukan roadshow keliling Indonesia.
Okay, like before the pandemic, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, offline roadshows.
Telco provider.
Oh wow, that's great. Does it work?
Yep.
I mean,
of course. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Kita
great.
mendapatkan banyak member dari Kalimantan, Sulawesi, Papua, Aceh.
Okay, great. So, Richa, do you can you share your experience about how marginalized groups can share their works, like really, or they can have their voice heard, like as wide as possible, as to as many people as possible.
Oh, I'm not sure I really have a concrete suggestion, but I do think that it would be really great if all of us could seek out wherever possible platforms that do highlight marginalized voices and stories, experiences like EGA's, for example, instead of relying on social media to show us a spectrum or broad enough spectrum of things. And I think that maybe I think, as we've been talking about, it does come down to digital literacy and actually understanding the context of the internet and sort of feeling like it's important to seek out voices and experiences that we don't share. Yeah, I'm not sure if that fully answers the question, but I think I just don't have a very concrete suggestion on
Yeah,
this.
actually, because I'm a journalist, so every day is a struggle to share our more in-depth stories as wide as possible. But it's kind of like it's difficult, and same like Richa, I don't have the answer. I think it's the our journalism's $1 million question at the moment. Everyone is trying to find an answer to that. How this the voices of the marginalized, the voice of the voices can be heard more loudly by others. That's the question. We haven't get the answer right now.
Yeah, I mean that's because of part of that. If I can just you know come in here, it's part of rules, right? Journalism is governed by a set of rules. So, for example, even a simple rule is covering both sides, right? So, when you do journalism, you have to cover the other side, and that kind of like it ensures to a certain extent that that article, have given uh, the chance for people to see that there are at least two sides, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent, we still have our bias, of
Of course,
course. Yeah.
everyone has a bias, but at least
Yeah.
in that little requirement, that that you have attempted to get a clarification from the other side, even if you and then even if you didn't get any clarification from the other side, but you wrote that, people are reading it, they said, oh, actually a good practice is to confirm from the other side whether
Mhm.
you get the confirmation or not. It's simple things like this is because journalism has rules, that it runs on social media, and other parts of the internet don't yet have these sets of rules, right? So that govern, so that we can have a healthy social media.
Thank you. We are approaching. We actually already lost track of time because of it's very interesting. So I will close the panel. Thank you so much to all three speakers. Great discussion, and thank Jakarta Arts Council, Dewan Kesenian Jakarta, for supporting GILF. Uh, I would like to encourage you to buy some of the panelists' books in GILF. It can be purchased in our official bookstore partner, Transit Santa. Visit at Transit Santa at Instagram and Twitter. Uh, Thank you everyone for this lively discussion. And I will give the floor to the festival director, Avianti Arman or Mbak Vivi, to give the closing statement for this panel. Thank you all, and it's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Mbak Vivi, silahkan.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for the very interesting and great discussion tonight. Um, this is a great closing to the whole the whole event of Road to Jakarta International Literary Festival 2021. Izinkan saya untuk menutup acara ini dengan menyampaikan sambutan terakhir di dalam bahasa Indonesia dan bahasa Inggris. Pertama-tama saya ingin mengucapkan rasa syukur bahwa kita telah menyelesaikan rangkaian acara Road to Jakarta International Literary Festival 2021 dengan sangat baik. First of all, I want to express my gratitude that we have completed the Road to Jakarta International Festival 2021 series very well. Saya sungguh berterima kasih kepada kurator Isyana Artarini dan Roni Agustinus, semua tim di belakang layar di bawah pengorganisasian Ana Rosdiana Angka, Gayus Citra, Ziggy, Zezia, Zeo, Vina Zabriski, dan anggota tim lain atas kerja-kerja hebat dan sepenuh hati yang telah teman-teman lakukan. I deeply thank the curators Isyana Artarini and Roni Agustinus and all the behind-the-scenes team under the organization of Ana Rosdiana Hangka, Gayus Cita, Ziggy, Zesia, Zeo, Fiena, Zabriski, and other team members for the great and heartfelt work that you all have done. Secara khusus saya ingin menyapa para pembicara dan moderator baik dalam panel diskusi maupun podcast. In particular, I would like to greet speakers and moderators both on panel discussions and podcasts. Anissa, Rizkiana, Berto Tukan, Boni Rambatan, Boni Triana, Brilliant Yotenega, Clara Ang, Dianita Kusuma Pertiwi, Dirdo Adityo, Doni Ahmadi, Yunis Andrada, Evi Mariani, Valisa Putri, Febi Indirani, Gilang Saputro, Hari Isra, Hera Diani, Hilmi Faik, Iksa Kabanu, Inaya Wahid, Jeremy Tiang, Hairani Baroka, Koko Henry Lubis, Martin Suryajaya, Nguyen Van Kwemai, Ninus Andarmuswaru, Norman Erikson Pasaribu, Raisa Kamila, Reda Gaudiamo, Reza Idria, Ria Peppermoon, Richa Kaupate, Rio Johan, Safar Nurhan, Seno Gumira Aji Dharma, Sunli Thomas Alexander, dan Tiffany Tsao. Atas nama Komite Sastra Dewan Kesenian Jakarta, Ben Sohib, Hasan Aspahani, Jarona Abdullah, Yusi Fianto Parianom, dengan tulus saya ucapkan atas kesediaan
Oh. I think Mbak Vivi's internet stops. Okay, let's wait, I think, for Mbak Vivi to return. Okay, maybe Isyana, maybe while we're waiting for Mbak Vivi to return, do you want to give an announcement or?
I think on behalf of Mbak Vivi and on behalf of Avianti Arman, the festival director, I would like to say thank you. I would like to say thank you to all the panelists, both in the discussion and the podcast. Oh, she's back.
She's back. Hi.
I'm sorry, where did I stop?
Thank
Just
you.
then?
Thank
okay,
you.
Yeah, okay. I just continue a little bit. Buat teman-teman, festival yang baru saja kita selenggarakan mungkin hanya menimbulkan riak kecil di tengah situasi menyedihkan yang membatasi mobilitas kita, di antara hingar-bingar berita buruk dan kedukaan yang melanda dunia. My dear friends, the festival that we have just held may only cause a small ripple in the midst of grief situations that limit our mobility, the frenetic of bad news, and the sadness that swept throughout the world. Tapi kita telah menolak untuk menyerah. Tidak ada waktu yang lebih tepat dari saat ini untuk memikirkan kembali makna pahlawan. Saya yakin saat ini kita sedang menulis sejarah yang lebih baik untuk masa depan sastra Indonesia dan sastra dunia yang lebih kritis, lebih adil, lebih manusiawi, lebih damai, dan lebih inklusif. We have refused to give up. There has never been a better time than today to rethink the meaning of heroes. I believe at this time, we are writing a better history for a more critical, more just, more humane, more peaceful, and more inclusive future of Indonesian and world literature. Sekali lagi terima kasih, sampai bertemu tahun depan. Thank you and see you all next year.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mbak Evi.